Break out the tinfoil, guys. This one's getting weird. Welcome back to Talking Dragon Age, the show where I talk about Dragon Age. Today, we're taking a look at the Primeval Thaig and the Red Lyrium Idol. I've had some ideas on these for a while, and I've finally gotten around to looking into it. Yeah, that pretty much sums up everything I do on this show. There are a few things we need to look at first. For one, the Codex entry for the Profane. I went over my theories for them in another episode, but what I didn't mention is what's down here at the bottom. Found scrawled on a wall in the lost Primeval Thaig by explorer Faruma Helmi, 510 Exalted. I can think of two main ideas for this. Either the exact same thing that happened in the Primeval Thaig also happened in Primeval Thaig, what with the dwarves starving and then eating nearby Lyrium, or Primeval Thaig is the Primeval Thaig. If that's the case, then it brings up another problem. It means that Faruma Helmi went there in 510 Exalted, yet it's claimed that not the Shaperate nor the Mining Cast had ever seen Red Lyrium before. A friend of mine said that maybe when Faruma Helmi was there, none of the Lyrium was tainted yet, as in, the Red Lyrium only appeared sometime after 510 Exalted. That kind of makes sense. That would rework my theory about the Profane a bit, but not dramatically so. But still, I'm hesitant to believe that. Part of the reason for that is this codex entry for Valdecine, which is a staff you also find in the Primeval Thaig. It says there was once a Thaig belonging to House Valdecine that was somehow responsible for supplying the entire Dwarven Empire with Lyrium. One day, they closed the door to their Thaig and spoke to no one, not to nobles or even a visiting paragon. After quite a while, the doors opened and not a single dwarf was found inside. There were no bodies or even a sign of what happened. The only thing they found inside the Thaig was a staff made of, quote, a strange metal that resembled Lyrium and chilled one's heart like a remembered sorrow. The king sealed the staff inside the Thaig, and no dwarf ever ventured there again, a tale recounted by a shaper. So why was this staff in the Primeval Thaig? Did someone go to Valdecine Thaig, break in, take the staff, and then take it to the Primeval Thaig? Or is the Primeval Thaig actually Valdecine Thaig? If it weren't for the fact that this entry was recorded by the Shaperate, I'd be tempted to think it was just a tall tale. I mean, for starters, how did a single Thaig supply the entire Dwarven Empire with Lyrium? Something else I thought was noteworthy was that the staff is the same model as Veracity, which doesn't have a description, but is looted from Zebenkek, a forbidden one. Normally I don't put too much stock in reused assets, but this one stands out to me. Now something else I want to mention is the entry for the Primeval Thaig itself. It talks about a scavenger who returned to Orzammar, presumably from the Primeval Thaig. The scavenger is clearly going crazy, but describes the place as best he can. Quote, he spoke of great statues and temples. Temples! He spoke of things that could have only been made by magic, and of impossible ruins untouched by Darkspawn. He described creatures the likes of which we've never seen. I've conferred with the Shaper, and he says the memories date back to the founding of the first Thaig. What could have come before that? Yes, we're unable to explore these depths the scavenger spoke of because of the Darkspawn, but surely the memories would speak of such places if they existed. Yet in this scavenger's belongings, amidst all the filth, there was a single idol. It was clearly of dwarven make, but not resembling any paragon on record. The idol was dressed in a manner I've never seen. The Shaper of Memories also couldn't identify it, or the substance from which it was made. The thought that the memories might be wrong is unsettling. Excerpt from a report sealed in the Orzammar Royal Archives by order of King Analar Geldenblade in 848 Blessed. Okay, so why the hell are we able to read this? That aside, the fact that this codex entry mentions another idol is interesting for a few reasons. For starters, did the Primeval Thaig have two idols? Or did the scavenger come from another Thaig just like the one we found? And the fact that they mention it was made from a strange substance is eerily similar to what was said about the Valdecine staff. But if the Valdecine staff really was made from red lyrium, which definitely seems, why did it not affect the party? Or, for that matter, anyone we may have sold it to? I mean, we can have red lyrium weapons in Inquisition too, so maybe they're just playing fast and loose with the rules. So completely ignoring that, as it seems the developers want us to, what happened to this idol? If it was normal lyrium, it would have been recognized. It may be red lyrium, but then what happened to it? I mean, if they kept it, then it should have started affecting people like it did Bartrand. Unless they knew how to store it safely, which, come on, they did not. Besides, Varric says no one in Orzammar knew about red lyrium. If the Shaperate had the idol, that wouldn't be true. So did they just toss it into lava or something? I don't know why they would do that, but there's no way they had it for 200 years and it affected no one. Okay, so let's recap what we have so far. Viruma Helmi found profane in Primeval Thaig, which may or may not be the true name of the Primeval Thaig. The Valdecine staff was found in the Primeval Thaig, but its codex entry says it was sealed in Valdecine Thaig. So how did it get there unless they are one and the same? It's certainly possible that it was moved there, but how and why? Also, the staff was made of a strange metal that resembled lyrium, but chilled one's heart like a remembered sorrow. Likewise, the codex entry for the Primeval Thaig itself mentions an idol brought back which was made from a strange substance that even the Shaperate couldn't identify, though it was clearly of dwarven make and supposedly came from an impossible Thaig. So the Shaperate did the obvious thing with this ancient artifact made from a never-before-seen substance and threw it into lava. The staff, on the other hand, despite probably being made from red lyrium, carried no ill effects at all. I suppose it's possible that the staff we get is just a replica or something. That doesn't explain why we would get the codex entry, which doesn't mention that, but it may explain why it didn't affect anyone. But then, why and how would this be done if the staff was sealed inside the Thaig? Okay, so moving on before I hurt myself, let's talk more about the Primeval Thaig itself. First thing I want to do is look back at its codex entry. It's not so obvious from what we were able to explore, but it says there were temples, things that could have only been made by magic, and that it hadn't been touched by Darkspawn. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? The codex entry for the Shabertal mentions buildings that resembled temples. I went over a lot of that in my Shabertal episode, but the short version is that these buildings, and probably more elsewhere, were constructed before the Titans fell. If these include temples, and the entire Titan is untouched by Darkspawn, and the expedition is well past the deep roads as Bartrand claims, well, we're in a Titan. It's probably not awake, maybe it's even dead, but I'm 86% sure we're in one. It would explain why it's unlike any other known Thaig, if it was built before the fall of the Titans, which I will now be referring to as the Sundering. And finally, I want to talk about some other stuff that's in the Thaig, specifically Tevinter stuff. A lot of these statues are clearly Tevinter. Tevintish? Tevinteren? Tevine? No, that's the language. Tevinan? Tevinian? Tevan? Tevinti? Tevinter. Specifically, these giant things that are called the Claws of Dumat. Again, I usually don't put a lot of stock in reused assets, but these stand out. The only concrete description of them I could find is a note, not included in the codex, that you find in the Fade during Here Lies the Abyss. From what I can gather, these were little more than ceremonial, sacrificial execution devices. So why are they down here in the Primeval Thaig? Well, I think Tevinter was there studying the Thaig. But why? And how did they find it? Well, that may relate to something else. Let's talk about the idol. We know from the codex earlier that there are at least 2 of them. Assuming they're of the same origin, they were both made by the ancient dwarves. The Thaig itself may predate the Sundering, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the idol does too. Regardless, I think the idol is more than just a trinket. I think it's the key to an Alluvian. We know that an Alluvian key can be anything: knowledge, power, a phrase, or an object. Why would the dwarves have an Alluvian, and why would these idols be the key to activating them? Well, we know that the ancient elves had a connection to the dwarves. For one, some elves were taken in as refugees at Cat Halash. And of course, the deep roads in Trespasser connect to an elven temple. The ancient elves fought the Titans and mined their bodies for lyrium, but it's implied that the elves cared nothing for the dwarves, thinking them mindless workers. So maybe after the Sundering, elves and dwarves worked together down there. Or maybe the elves expelled the dwarves from the Primeval Thaig and took it over for something. Maybe lyrium mining, maybe a forward base for their assault on the Titan. They may have vacated it and more dwarves came later. That's a lot of maybes. Maybe the dwarves welcomed the elves after the veil was drawn, just like they did at Cat Halash. Maybe the elves found the idols there and decided to make them into Alluvian keys. But there's one far more dramatic possibility I can think of. What if the idols aren't keys to specific Alluvians, but all Alluvians? As in, an Alluvian skeleton key. That may explain why they're made from lyrium, but there's more. What evidence do I have that the idols relate to Alluvians at all? Red lyrium. To preface this, we don't know if the idol was crafted from red lyrium or if it was just normal lyrium that later became tainted. Now, we don't know for sure how lyrium becomes tainted, and I will talk about that in an upcoming episode for lyrium. But, in the Dalish elf origin, The alluvion itself carries the taint. It's what drew the Darkspawn there, it's what tainted Tamlin and Mythal. Tamlin touches the mirror and says he sees a city, and that there's a great blackness. Two options. The obvious one is that the mirror connected to the Black City. Option 2, it connected to a Thaig overrun by the Taint. In either scenario, if there was an alluvion in the Primeval Thaig connecting to one of those places, it may explain why the Lyrium there became corrupted. Though clearly not all of it became corrupted, so yeah, I don't know about that part. I may talk more about that in my Lyrium episode. Wow, I did not expect this to get so long. So let's try to recap. The Primeval Thaig may be Rayvan Thaig, and it may be Valdocine Thaig. It was probably built before the Sundering, and I think an alluvion was once there, with the idol being a key. Oh, and Tevinter was there at some point to study it. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like and comment, and remember, Tala na das.